I was a very picky eater before my mission. I liked meat, potatoes, and bread. And my mom said, I hope you go somewhere foreign where they can really expand your palate. And I said, okay. And so I got down there, and rice and beans, I didn't really like rice and beans before my mission either, but now I love it. I can't live without them. But they had this one food that would be kind of like the lasagna of America, where everyone eats lasagna here. They all love it. There they call it feijoada. And it's so common. And it's like, it was a slave food originally, because the slaves would cook for their masters, and they would give them all the good parts of the pig, like the bacon, the hindquarters, everything that was good about the pig, they would give to their masters, and what was left over, they would make their food out of. So like the snout, the tongue, the ear, the tail, the foot, all that they threw into a pot and cooked it. And that became feijoada. And now everyone, most of Brazilians are descendants from slaves, so they eat this food called feijoada. And I remember my first time eating the MTC, and it was all rubbery because it's mostly fat, and I just like, oh, I cannot eat this for 2 years. I would fast that day in the MTC because I didn't want to eat that food. But now I love it. I loved it as soon as I got out to the mission field, and it was different because different people liked different ways. They would like, oh, I like mine with a little pig's foot, and other people, oh, I don't like pig's foot, it's too heavy for me. And it was interesting to see how they would talk about their food, and I remember they don't waste anything. Any part of the animal they use, like, I had never eaten cow's foot before in my entire life, and there I got it, and it's called mokoto. And there are different ways to prepare it, but the most common is they make it into a broth, like a very sweet soup, like the ligaments and everything, it'll get all cooked together, and at least this really nice soup. My first time eating mokoto, the member literally just took a cow's foot and cooked it. So I'm sitting there, I'm starving, and I have my rice and beans ready, and she just, bam, cow's foot. Just an actual, like, you picture cow's foot in real life, put that on a plate. And I looked at my companion, I go, Elder, we're going to eat this? He's like, with a smile on your face, Elder. And so it's just, different people interpret the foods there differently. And so I ate it, and it was not the best food I've ever eaten. But then I got the other mokoto where they make it into like a soup, and I loved it. And so it was very different to see the different types of foods that they would make. I mean, I ate chicken's feet. I've eaten every single part of a pig you can imagine. I've eaten bull's intestines with their tongues cooked inside of it, and it sounds gross, but it's really good. And it's totally different to come back home and to be totally fearless in eating any kind of food. If you don't tell me what it is, I'll eat it. And so my favorite food, I think, that I learned was, I think feijoada was probably my favorite. But what was interesting is that there, if you offer someone an egg, like a fried egg, you are calling that person poor, because eggs down there are for only poor people. They're very cheap. And so if you only eat eggs, you are poor. And for us missionaries, we were poor, so we loved it. And so we loved fried eggs and ground beef with bread. That's what we ate a lot of the times at home. Not in the members' houses, of course. And so it was very interesting when I remember when I would Skype my family, and they would say, really, eggs are for poor people down there? That's interesting. And so it's just different because we would say, oh, food stamps are for people in poverty. I feel like that's what it would be in Brazil is, oh, you eat eggs and bread, you're on food stamps. And it's just a different way to see how they lived and how they categorized different foods. I remember I ate once in a very wealthy house. It was the most rich person I've ever met in my entire mission. And they had like this huge old table full of all this beautiful food, but no rice and beans, which is a staple food for them because it fills you up and it's very cheap. Every Brazilian eats rice and beans, but not the rich, because it's, I don't want to say beneath them, but it's just that they can buy higher quality things like, I don't know, noodles, like very expensive pastas or something like that. They don't need rice and beans. And I remember sitting at this table and I felt out of place because there was no rice and beans. I was like, we left the house, like my companion, I go, are you still hungry? And he goes, yeah. And I go, because there were no rice and beans, we're not full. And it was very different. And the family would be sitting there and they'd be like, oh, I can't remember the last time I had rice and beans. And I was offended. I was like, I had rice and beans this morning with a fried egg. So I'm the poorest of the poor. But the food there, you can tell how humble a person is. Like, and they won't admit, if you meet a poor person on the street, they will give you the best of what they have. So if the best is what they have is a fried egg and ground beef, and they are offering that means they are very, very, very poor. And they were willing to give you anything. I remember in my first area in that favela, this lady we were teaching, she worked at a family's home in a very far away place, and she had to travel like 3 or 4 buses in a metro to get there. And I remember that night we were going to teach her, and she sat us down. She said, I have a surprise for you. And she goes in the kitchen, comes back out with her hands behind her back, and she pulls out 2 fruit drinks, one for me, one for my companion. And the eyes of her children just like got as big as dinner plates. Like, they wanted that drink. And she probably worked like an extra 5 or 6 hours to get that enough money to buy that drink for us. And it actually was a very terrible drink. It wasn't good at all, but I drank everything, and I gave the drink to her kids because I just couldn't stand having them look at me like that and not share. And that they would work so hard for someone, a foreigner, nonetheless, to come into their home, teach them a foreign doctrine, and then they would work that much harder just to buy us a little thing, and just to show their appreciation. And it was amazing to me.